Jennifer Van Dyke, Jonathan Davis, and a full cast.
Chapter 1. Abasi Station. It's hard to choose a favorite thing about outer space. But if Zero Huang had to pick just one, it would be gravity. Or more specifically, the complete lack of gravity. Planets were pretty cool, but in space, he could fly. Which was why, waiting in the giant line to board the Pathfinder, he was sitting on the ceiling.
You're supposed to hold the railing.
Zero's mom, of course, was holding the railing tightly. She always followed the rules. In fact, looking up and down the long, straight hallway on Abasi Station, almost all of the passengers were holding onto the railing, grasping it tightly to keep from floating away. The only ones who weren't were kids like Zero. Though at 12 years old, he was probably the oldest of the goof-offs. All of them were wearing the one-piece coveralls that marked them as Pathfinder passengers.
Just hold the stupid railing, Zero.
Yan was Zero's middle brother, almost 15 years old, and always acted like he was in charge.
Don't call him Zero.
Their father had his nose deep in a book. Not a tablet book like a normal person reads, but a real, old, dead tree book like they used to read in the olden days. He wasn't holding the railing either. Instead, he had his foot hooked under a bar that ran along the floor. That's how the real space travelers did it, he'd told them. Keep your foot under the bar and you can stay in one place and use both your hands, just like on Earth. Zero's father was kind of an expert in that stuff. After all, he was one of the engineers who'd built the Pathfinder. Yaozu Huang had spent most of the last 5 years on Abasi Station, overseeing the construction. Zero still thought he was probably wrong about the floor bars, though, because why would a real space traveler want to stick to the floor like that? You could literally fly up here. Railings were for losers. Zero's parents hated it when his brothers called him Zero, but Zero didn't mind it. Anything was better than his real name, Sushu, because then his brothers would call him...
You mean Tushu?
Yep, that's what they'd call him. It wasn't even an insult. Zero didn't know why they called him that, but he still hated it, which he supposed was probably why they called him that.
Come on down, Tushu. Put those two shoes on the floor.
My name is Zero.
Park was Zero's oldest brother, already 16, which was apparently old enough that he considered his brothers to be completely beneath his notice. Most of the time, at least. If he was teasing Zero now, that probably meant he was bored. Better bored than cranky, Zero decided. Park had a girlfriend, but her family wasn't part of the Pathfinder mission. He could text her for a few more hours. Abasi Station had great reception. But then they'd board the ship, settle in, take off, and Park would never see her again. They'd never see anyone again, really. Unless that person were on the Pathfinder, too. Or maybe the Torchbearer. After more than a century of searching, the human race had finally found 2 habitable planets, called Genji and Kaguya, orbiting a star called Murasaki, and they'd built 2 colony ships to go out and settle them. The Torchbearer mission had left last month, and last week it had cleared the solar system and boosted the Medina star drive, accelerating to almost 1/5 of light speed. In about a month, Pathfinder would clear the solar system and do the same. But even at that speed, the journey would take a very long time. Murasaki was more than 20 light years away. The Pathfinder, and everyone on it, would be traveling for 105 years. Everyone in line moved about 4 paces forward, and then stopped. Another family had boarded. Zero pushed off from the ceiling, floated forward to catch up with his family, and then reached out a hand to push off Yan's head, settling himself back up against the ceiling. Yan slapped at him with his free hand, but it was too late, and Zero laughed, just out of reach. Yan sneered, let go of the railing, and kicked off from the floor to attack him. He got high enough to poke Zero in the ear before their mother caught him by the leg and pulled him back down.
Hold on to the railing. Zero's not. He's not starting fights either. He pushed my head.
Stop shouting.
Their father calmly turned a page in his book. Yan scowled, but hooked his foot under the floor bar and crossed his arms in a huff. Zero rubbed his ear where Yan had poked him and tried to decide the best way to get revenge. He thought for a minute and got an idea so horrible it made him smile. He started quietly spitting, forming a blob of saliva in the air in front of him. It floated in the hallway like a water balloon without the balloon, a full sphere of solid spit. It took him a few minutes to get it nice and big, and the line advanced a few more times. He tapped the bubble, trying to make it move, but all that did was break off a few smaller droplets. Zero caught them before they floated onto any of the other people in line, and guided them back to the larger bubble. He played with it for a bit, and found that if he pushed on the air with his palms, the little air currents would move the water. He gathered all the spit back into one big spitball, pushed it toward his family, and gave it a double-handed air shove straight at Yen's head. That didn't work nearly as well as he'd hoped. Instead of flying toward Yen, the spitball simply rippled and stayed in place, and then Zero's hands slammed into it, and the ball splashed into dozens of tiny spit drops that flew in every direction at once. Zero shouted a warning, but only some of the people got out of the way. Spit flew into his mother's hair, and into the hair and clothes and faces of the people standing near them in line. One drop even hit a page of his dad's book. It seemed like everyone got spit on them except Yan. But that didn't stop Yen from kicking off of the floor again and flying up to tackle Zero against the ceiling. Their spit-covered neighbors gasped and shrieked, and their mom snapped at them, and their dad roared at them to come down. Park yanked them both down.
Stop it this instant.
They put Yen at the back of the family, and Zero at the front, and Zero hooked his foot under the lower railing and waited. An hour later, they reached the front of the line.